Good, go ahead.
Good. Glasses are clear with the light?
Nope, you're okay.
Good. Ready when you are, CB.
Okay. I'm Susan Postal. We're at the 10th Mountain Reunion, Hail and Farewell in Denver, Colorado, and it is August the 3rd, 2007. John, would you please state your name and your unit number?
Yeah,
please?
John Henry Weaver, Jr.,
And would you spell your last name, please?
W-E-A-V-E-R.
And state your unit and your rank.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
State your unit and your rank.
I was with the 10th Mountain Medical Battalion. At the time, I was a captain.
And at what time frames were you in the 10th? When did you enter?
I joined the division in the, I was in another unit and I had to get into the division. I wanted to be there and I finally got involved with them. And I think it was October 1943. And I was relieved after we came home, which would be November 1945.
Okay, so you were there during.
What?
You were there during the long haul there for Mount Belvedere and Ruth Ridge.
The what?
You were there for the long haul then during all of the fighting.
Well, I was at a medical unit which I was very unhappy with, because when I was drafted, they said you can't be in the infantry because you wear glasses. 2 months later, Pearl Harbor happened, and I think if I had one leg, they'd take me. Everything changed, so I was brought in again in April of '43, and so my total Army service was from April '43 until I was released in November or what it was, 1945.
Were you then at Camp Hale?
No, I was not. I joined the Camp Hale in October of '43.
October 43 at Camp Hale.
43, 44, and then 45.
Well, would
And our
you-
war was on, it was in May of 45.
Okay.
So about a year and a half,
Year and a half.
maybe more, maybe a little more.
Would you tell us how you said you wanted to be in the 10th?
Well, I didn't like, I was a skier before the war. Matter of fact, I'd formed a little ski club in the late 30s. We had about 25 members, and we call it the Queens Ski Runners, because Queens County is where I lived in New York City. And we go off skiing weekends and snow trains of that sort. So I really wanted to be in the ski troops. And you had to volunteer and get 3 letters of recommendation and so forth. But I had a business going, and I didn't want to go unless they needed me, so I waited to be drafted. And so when I was drafted in April of 1942, I was put in the Medical Battalion. I think, it's hard to say why, but I think I had a pretty good Army General Classification test score, which everybody took, because they might be maybe a surgical technician or something. So I went through basic training in Fort Lee and Fort Pickett, Virginia. Then I was selected out of a company of 200 men or so, 250. I and someone else were selected to made temporary corporals to train the next cycle. And that started me on my career. The big thing I remember about that, my pay went from $21 to $54 a month. I remember that. Somebody said, it's only temporary. You don't want to sew the stripes on. You want to glue them on. That's a temporary assignment. So then I was pretty good sergeant or corporal, training corporal. So they had a board of officers, which they do periodically, to select people for officers candidate school. And I was selected and I passed. So I was sent to one of the most interesting OCSs in the country, I think. I started in October. It's Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, which is on the Susquehanna River on the west side, about 20 miles from Harrisburg. Carlisle Barracks is probably the oldest fort still in business in the United States. It was there during the French and Indian War, which, because it was at that time, the Indians were anything west of there. In fact, Braddock, and when he went to conquer Fort Duquesne, which is the French had established, which is now Pittsburgh. He had this the wilderness pass, and George Washington with his militia went by. Of course, they were attacked by the French and Indians, decimated pretty much, had to retreat. I understand Braddock was such a serious defeat that they didn't want to know that Indians at Braddock had been defeated. They say buried Braddock right in the street, right in the mud road, and covered it over so they wouldn't know he was gone. And they got back to, that was the French and Indian War. That fort is still there. And also that same Carlisle Barracks is where the Indian School was founded in the last 1800s. And they picked young men from most of the Western Indian tribes to bring them into a leadership position. And they had some very famous teams, and the most famous athlete, one of the top athletes in our country, was James Thorpe, Indian. He was he was the one that tore up the football field. It became a powerhouse, beating all the colleges. They were a small school, and he won, as you know, he did very well in the Olympics in '02 or '03 or something like that. And he's still a very named man. That was the place that I trained.
And so you came out of Officer Kennedy.
I graduated in January of 1943 as a second lieutenant, Medical Administrative Corps.
And at that point, where were you sent after you finished the schooling? Where were you sent after that?
Well, I was sent down to Fort Dix with a bunch of other young officers to establish what I call a numbered station hospital, number 145. There were a couple of us. This was 145. They had one lieutenant colonel doctor who I think would rather be somewhere else, a couple of other senior officers, but most of us. So I became the plans and training officer, which is operations be involved with. This was a training thing. And that's where I stood for until after I was in 6 months later, like in September, I guess it was, I got a promotion to first lieutenant. And but I was still, the war was going on full blast, and I thought this was no way to send the war. I could see us winding up in some isolated island, and they drop off casualties. And you know, I wanted to be where the action. I was like 22 years old, you know. So I still had hopes of the ski school. So I borrowed the colonel's vehicle. He had a sedan signed to him, as all commanders have. And I went up to the New York City, and I can't think of the name of the building offhand. And there, this National Ski Patrol had established an office for recruiting people for the ski troops, under the control of a gentleman who was the father of the ski troops, Charles Minot Minnie Dole. And I went to his office, and unannounced, I had my uniform on, and he was there, and I introduced myself, and I told him, I said I was a skier, and I wanted to get into the ski troops. Now, normally you need a letter of three recommendations, you know, you're a rabbi, you're a minister, a priest, or somebody, a lot they know about mountain troops, but you know, character thing. And I didn't have any of that, but I was an officer already, first lieutenant. And he picked up the phone, I'll never forget it. He had a direct line to Washington, War Department, and his counterpart, Major Jackman, Al Jackman, was on the other side. Hi, Jack, or Al, whatever. I have a young officer who's qualified for the ski troops. A week later, I was in Camp Hale. A couple of things prove. Officers see better than men, enlisted men. Same eyes. Now I'm in where I wanted to be. So I was very fortunate, and of course it was a colder, you know,
and
inside
so
of
you
here.
arrived at Camp Hale when?
Yeah, I was in Camp Hale, yeah.
About what time frame did you arrive there?
Did I arrive there? I guess a week after I saw Minnie Dole, I would say it was in October of that year, 43.
And was it
It's cold.
cold? Was it real busy then, or were there more coming in every day?
I don't know. I came in by myself. I landed at midnight at night, went across Loveland Pass like all the other guys, 12,000-foot pass. I almost passed out when I picked up my bag and walked to the gate, and somebody had a 50-pound bag at that out. You know, I'd been in New York City a day before, 2 days before. So, yeah.
So tell me about the training at Camp Hale.
Well, the training was arduous. It was as it was supposed to be. The weather was foul. The young officer who, in the medical battalion, the adjutant, young man, lieutenant, and he looked out the window. It was about, I don't know, 15 above zero, and the snow was coming down like crazy. And he says, "Tell me, Lieutenant," and he used an expletive. "Do you mean you really volunteered for this blank?" I said, "Yeah." He didn't, but I did. We had a fair number of people who did not go through the process, but they were looking for the true skier, mountain climber, which there are very few of those, trapper, buffalo hunter, park ranger. These are the people we're looking for that could live comfortably in a very adverse climate, isolated, high altitude, which is important, because ski troops and mountain troops traditionally in the other parts of the world are very much involved in high mountains. I mean, the highest mountain, of course, is in Europe, which is Mont Blanc, but then that's from you go on down from there. And they run 10, 12, 15,000, which is what the Rockies are. The Rockies, most of them are, the big ones are 14,000. And that was our playland. We maneuvered, and yeah, I fell right into it. Somebody said, "Oh, I went back to see my old group." And they said, "Is it true that you joined this outfit?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Why would you do a thing like that? You could get killed." I said, "It's the nurses." And they said, "We don't have any nurses." I said, "That was the problem."
Well, what's your favorite memory of Camp
What?
Hale? What is your favorite memory of
My favorite
Camp?
memory?
Mhm.
Well, I got 100 of them. Which would you want me to mention?
What
Well, it was fun.
favorite?
I loved the training. I loved the skiing. it was sometime in this stage, I think it was not too long afterwards, became the plans and training, what is the S3, which is called the S3. S2, S3. Intelligence is S2. Plans and training or operations is S3. I won't give you the whole story, and so they came to me, and the 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment was coming back from Kiska, and they were supposed to have something to do with watching Camp Hale while other troops were busy, watching Cooper Hill, which is our ski area on Tennessee Pass. So somebody said, "Well, take your medical company and go over there and watch that," which I said, "Oh, do I have to?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Thank you, sir." Reminds me of Brer Rabbit, "Don't throw me in the rabbit patch," you know. And he says, "I was born and bred in the rabbit patch." So, briar patch. So I went up there with a company of maybe not 50 men, and we slept up there, and we skied every day, which is tough. And I went around in the area, and maneuvering, and I had the whole week up there. Beautiful, lovely. That would be in January of '44.
And the D series were after that.
Well, then we did the usual retune training, and I got promoted to captain in September of that year. I think, let me see, yeah. D series was in '44. You heard about D series. This is '44, which happened in March of '44.
And that was while you were there?
And, oh yeah, I wasn't the commander of a company, but I was like the assistant deputy commander or executive officer of Company C, A, B, C, D, E of the Medical Battalion. So the A goes to 86, 5, A, B comes 86, 87, it would be C. That was where so I joined their regimental combat team, they call it, all the unit under the regimental commander. He has all these disparate parts in his command, medical engineers, plus the assigned personnel, 2,000 or 3,000 people. And I stayed with him for the D series. First night out, we were marching up Tennessee Pass. It was very cold. That night, it was supposed to have hit 35 below zero. So we got as far as Tennessee Pass, and I said to the first sergeant, I want every man, I want the biggest tent we got. We must have had some tents there. I want all the stoves we got, get them going. We're all going to, this D series starts tomorrow. Tonight we're going to stay alive. So we got all in this great big tent, and so we lived, and we went on from there. And then I stayed with the 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment. I will always use the word mountain to describe them different from any other infantry regiment. You always talk about mountain, goes in there. And we had the regular ABC. We had ABC, D no, D series is the final. I'm getting too complicated, but D is it's like when a ship is made to go into service. Before they do that, they have a shakedown cruise to see whether it leaks, men know what to do, you know, how to operate it. So that's what the D series was. It was a shakedown, and if you pass, I mean, you're qualified to go overseas. If you don't pass, you're still qualified to go overseas. So that was really something. And I sprained my ankle skiing by myself, which is bad, in deep snow, and I had my big pack on, and my pack went this way and I went this way. And I sprained my ankle very badly. Well, I found a way to go to the doc, and he put a boot on so I stayed for the whole thing. I used a ski pole to operate with. And we had the Weasel, it's the over the snow vehicle. And I think in my company we had about 3 or 4 or 5 of them, I can't remember. And they were very helpful.
And at what time?
And the big battle that I remember was the battle of Vale Pass, which was the last part of the D series, one regiment defending Vale Pass against the other 2 regiments. I mean, they're maneuvering in the snow and ice and so forth. And we built a fence, and snow fence, which is like a fort thing. I think somebody said they want to put barbed wire. I said, "Look, be cautious about that, because someone's going to get hurt on the barbed wire." But it was very cold. I had to evacuate one of the officers, captains. He couldn't take it, and we always used something they called turpentine hydrate and codeine, and it was common. It was the big thing against colds and sneezing, and I think this one young officer, doctor, somebody said we checked. He said, "Captain, I guess I was lieutenant still. That was in September of that year. He said, "Would you check on so and so?" And I looked in his mountain tent. He was out cold. I looked, and I saw all these bottles of turpentine hydrate and codeine. I said, "Yeah, he'll live, but you got to get him out of here." So we did that. But a lot of little things that happened. 2 of these guys talked me into borrowing a Jeep one night. They were getting to go down to Dillon, which was nothing then. It was just a little place, and they had a bar down there and something else. Well, I shouldn't have done this. That was my Jeep, my over the snow Weasel. So we went in there. There was a young couple plus 2 GIs. So we had a beer, and the GIs left. And we went out, and guess what? The Weasel was gone, because you can't turn it off. There's no key. I said, "Oh boy, that's a stupid thing." So I went in there, I begged this young man and this woman to take me in their car to try to head off this Weasel. So we did, and about a mile ahead of me I saw this snow. I knew where the snow goes fast. It goes 35 miles an hour. So I said to one officer, "You grab him, I'll grab him, do that." We forced him off the road, got these 2 other guys that were in the bar, out of the thing, and out of the Weasel, and we dropped them off part of the way. I said, "You got to walk the rest of the way." It wasn't too bad. It was only 0. And I just never. I said, "For no more of these doctors getting to me, come on, Johnny." That's the end of that. That was a wonderful training. It was everything I expected it to be, and tough, but that's what I wanted. I love the outdoors. I love to ski. Learn to mountain climb.
And at what time then did you leave Camp Hale to go to?
Well, we went to, unfortunately, as you probably know, were sent down for flatland training to Camp Swift outside of Austin, Texas, and that was terrible. We took our mules. Mules got lost. We wandered around Texas, and we had still mostly woolen clothing. I mean, we went from temperature of an average in the day for, I don't know, but down to double that, But and we didn't need flatland training, but somebody thought we did. So we get ready to go overseas. We were scheduled to go in December of that year, which we did go, of course. And I had a little problem. I just married in that June, and my wife was pregnant, and she wanted to go home to Boston, where she lives, and she had a car, and I didn't know what the hell to do with a car, and I didn't want her to. She said she refused to go without the baby she was concerned about. So I begged the colonel to let me go. He said, "Well, I need you to travel." I said, "I know, sir, but I'll make it up some other way. I'll work overtime." So I put her on a train from Atlanta, Georgia, where my sister lived. Then I drove the car all the way to Boston, night and day. No highways in there, all through little towns. And I dropped the car, and then I met the unit back at the port of embarkation, which was in Virginia, near Norfolk. And I joined the unit back there. I was gone a week, Meanwhile, they moved up by train.
And so,
Happy, the colonel wasn't very happy, but I made him happy later.
So you left the States and headed for Italy.
I'm sorry?
And you left the States and headed
Oh,
for
yeah,
Italy.
you know.
And tell us about your experience.
We departed, we went to Naples, then we transported to a small boat run by the Navy, very small, flat bottom, because it was close to the shore. And they had quite a storm. We got out of Naples Harbor, all of a sudden the storm hit, so we figured this tip. So we got off at a place called, I know it my own name, but I can't, not Biloxi, but something like that. An old Roman town. We spent the day or night, the day there until the storm. And we went up to Leghorn, or on the coast, and we debarked there over to Florence. And there was a big park below Florence, or Firenze, as we say, which was a king's hunting grounds. We bivouacked there along the Arno River, and that would be, I don't know, in just December. Then we all moved up to the front lines, which was across some mountains into a place called Termi, and we entered Camp Tesoro, which was Mussolini established in another city. We lived there for a couple of days. Meanwhile, we were near the battle because we sent troops out in skis. There was still snow on the ground, just testing, you know. So they had a couple of firefights, but it wasn't serious. Then they decided to put us to attack Mount Belvedere. I suppose you've heard a lot about Mount Belvedere. That was the key thing, and the German army came like this. We had to straighten out the line. So the general decided, see how good we really were, we had to eliminate the Germans from Riva Ridge, which is a series of high mountains alongside of Belvedere. It was not at one mountain, it was a series of small mountains connected, and they call it the ridge. And it's all about the ridge, you read it, Riva Ridge. And elements of the 86 conquered at night. They had the leading guys in the mountain tribes put down fixed ropes for the guys behind. And they got up and had a firefight up there. We captured it. The next day, the assault started on Belvedere because the Germans lost their eyes. I mean, we shut them down. So that started the whole thing right there. One interesting thing happened. As I was medical, I was supposed to wear a brassard, and I had a helmet with a red cross, but I didn't wear the brassard. I was driving a Jeep down a little town, and a woman comes running, and she met a Dr. Audie. She had a baby. She wanted me to have a baby, have a baby, and I said, I don't want to. I never told me to have it. All I would say is get more hot water. So I pushed my foot on the pedal and took off. I was cowardly, but I didn't want to get involved with trying to bring an Italian baby into town. And this little town we were in was, I know it like my own name. Headquarters of the division was set up there. We hadn't yet started we had started the attack. We moved from Lozano or Giudiziatico over to this small town. And I was with the liaison officers, some of whom you've probably talked to, John Litchfield for one. There was 3 or 4. These were high-class skiers, Dartmouth-trained skiers, and they'd been involved with the infantry, and they were infantry, and they were from the regiments to the division, and I was for the medical to the division. So I attended all division daily reports, what's going to happen, who's going to do what, and I advised the colonel, and of course what would happen. But I early realized that my value was of no value if I was back where the colonel was with the clearing company at his headquarters, because that's where the light line was. Light line is an area beyond which you cannot, coming forward, use lights. You use little cat lights, but no lights, okay? Because that gives your position away. And that's where the clearing station was. Clearing station is where the collecting companies took the casualties, and they were sorted out, triage, as the French say. Some would stay in the collecting company, give them some hot soup and tender loving care, go back. Others had to go right back to the hospital. So ambulances from back units, like evacuation hospitals from Corps and Army, would pick our guys up and take them in their ambulances, and our ambulances would go back forward again. And that's the way that worked. So there's nothing for me back there. I'm not a doctor. I mean, my interest was being with the collecting companies, where they should be, did they run out of supplies, did they need something they didn't have, and that's what I did. And I saw a lot of the action as a result of that. Oh, I started to tell you, this mountain, the night we went in, there was about 4 of liaison guys, captains, all officers, captains, except one lieutenant. We were on the top floor of this 3-story building, and a big, something went, we heard a shell coming in from, the Germans were 10 miles away or more, and it landed. Second shell came in a lot closer, and nobody said anything. We all picked up our sleeping bags and walked down the stairs to the basement. The third shell came in, and we heard this big slam. It hit the building across the street, probably past our building by 5 feet, coming down. And somebody yelled medic, and I went over there. Now, all I carried in Mayo Medicine was I carried morphine syrettes taped to my helmet liner. I mean, I couldn't be a doctor. I didn't carry, I sometimes carried some bandages, but I mean, but I figured if a guy's in real pain, this might help him get over the shock until his own medical people could catch him. So it was a lieutenant colonel. He was the commander of the headquarters troops of the division. This is division headquarters now. And there was the Major Bostic, who was the commander of the MP company or platoon. Bostic was alive, pretty well damaged. The other man was dead in this bed they'd found. The room was a shambles. That's a little landed right in there. So I gave them both morphine, made a little prayer, and I said, get the medics to get in here as fast as you can. So that was my first taste of battle, like second day of the war. And it gets more interesting after that. So I spent most of my up front, and I saw John speak. John, how did you know so much? Well, I was all over. How would I not know? One of my close friends, John, the war for me was, I'm in this foxhole, and I can see 20 feet here, 10 feet here, and 10 feet there. That's the war for me. And that's the war for most soldiers. They work as a unit. They don't move around much. I had a Jeep. I had a driver. I had rations, maps. I knew what was going on, when the next attack would be, and I could insert myself, which is not the right word. I could report on if it was something, and make sure we were prepared with our. I remember going to one place in one of the attacks. It was a farmhouse, stone. Everything is stone, and they're bringing men down, and with litter. And there were a lot of men that didn't make it on the ground, and inside there were men still alive. And I remember, and they were cut up pretty badly. And our ambulances were coming in to pick them up and take them out. And I said, you know, this is the ugly face of war. To see all those people lying there who didn't make it, got killed and somewhere in the hill and were brought down. And you get the sense, as somebody said, you 2 foxholes, I'm in this one, you're in that one, the shell kills you, but I'm 10 feet out of been killed. So, you know, you get very, what's the word, I guess, fateful, is that the word? It's fate. It's just we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's the way war is for the real war. Not the Hollywood version. And so we got through the war. One incident I had was there was a town called Tole. This is when we broke out, not quite out yet, but T-O-L-E. And the 87th, which I spent much time with, although I wasn't signed to this, I was signed at headquarters of my battalion. I was the operations officer for the Medical Battalion and the intelligence officer. Maybe I didn't speak German, so I wouldn't have much. If a wounded German was brought in, one way to get intelligence was to talk to him about position of the enemy and what's going on. But I didn't do that. I don't speak German. We had other intelligence people there. So we got to a little town. We were in dirt roads, and our men were pinned down. There were 24 men, and the shells were coming in. There was a little ridge, and Tole was on the other side of this ridge. And there was this inevitable stone farmhouse with 3 or 4 wounded people in it. And I had a driver in my Jeep. So I said, if you can hold on to the Jeep yourself, you can hold him. I'll take you back to some medical installation because you're 2 miles ahead of everybody else. I want you to know. I'm with you 2 miles ahead of everybody else. So I put him in. At just about that time, a shell came within me to 25 feet away. It was probably a mortar shell, but they're just as dangerous as anything else. My driver tended to go nuts. Berserk is the word. And I said to him, move over. I said, if I'm going to get killed, it's not because you turned the Jeep on me. The shell's going to kill me. That's the honorable way to die, not because you turned this Jeep on both of us. So I took a wedge, drove us out of there to civilization. But they had a lot of things like that. Another high point was I was part of Task Force Duff. General Duff, Brigadier General, was the second commander of the division. And General Hayes At this point, we could almost see Po Valley, and most of the mountains were behind us. And there was a couple of roads there that, a couple of streams that had bridges, and it was very important if you can save a bridge. Of course, the Germans naturally would mine these bridges. And one bridge, I remember, is near Bompardo, and Bompardo is important because if you ever buy the special vinegar that, I can't remember the name of it offhand, it's made in, a lot of it's made in Bompardo. So he put this division, he put this task force together about, I don't know how many men, it was, 24 vehicles, we borrowed a couple of tanks and trucks, and I had my Jeep. I had no driver, I was by myself here. And I hooked onto this thing, and we went down, one bridge was saved, and they got there in time. They kept pushing. Meanwhile, the Germans are retreating, but a lot of them were behind us because we were moving so fast with this task force. And we're trying to, there was no bridge, so we wanted to be the first, we were probably the first unit in the Po River. We got there on April 23rd because that was my birthday, and I remember it distinctly. And it was dangerous. Germans on the side, Germans was a crook on the river, and they were standing sideways shooting stuff at us. Artillery. Barns were burning, houses were burning. The fire was, and we were driving all day, and so I pulled my Jeep, and I had dug a little thing. I wanted to write a letter to somebody. I put my coat over me, a little flashlight, and wrote a letter to my wife or something, I don't know what. And there was until early afternoon and evening, and there was a little house there, the inevitable stone house, and there was some noisy in there. So I went in there, and there was a captain of infantry somewhere, a couple of them, and the woman was cooking some food for 2 or 3 men. And the captain, I guess he was holding court, but he didn't like me coming and spoiling his game. So I said, listen, cool it, and something to eat, and I'll leave, or you can leave, I don't care which. At that point, 2 of the guys who work for the G3, which is, again, operations, these were men who made maps and stuff, and I knew them reasonably, not well, but I've been to their shop a lot. They were walking around with guns. I said, what are you doing? And they would say, well, like souvenirs. I said, hey, it's 10 o'clock at night. You've been working all day. You're dead. I'm dead. Everybody's dead. You're still alive. Go find a place to go to sleep. Now, don't walk around like that. I should have given a direct order and said, look, I'm telling you as an officer, you are, if we don't get killed, I'll court-martial you. If you killed, and I don't want you to get killed. I'd rather have a court-martial. Well, I wasn't strong enough, and the next morning they were found dead. So this is, you got to be careful. Then we crossed the Po River. They got some ships in there. One funny incident, the Germans in retreating had been all over Europe, and they picked up a lot of vehicles, French vehicles, whatever. And of course, we picked them up too and started driving them around. And the general the MP said, no, nothing goes across this bridge unless it's a GI vehicle. So this became a pool of every sort of, it must have been 50 or more cars sitting in this pool, Volkswagen, you name it, Italian vehicles. We pushed over, and one instance, we got to a little town called Villafranca, and they had an airport there. And the Germans, of course, then they had a big supply. We went in, one guy went in there, this German soldier was straightening out meat cans, cans that they use in food. I said, Jerry, it's over. Just drop it and go on out there. Just tell them you're a prisoner. Go home. Stop. We kept going, and we got to a little town. We went through Verona. This is the task force. We went through Verona, but then we moved over to the left to Lake Garda. You've probably heard about Lake Garda. It's the largest of the Italian lakes, and it knifes right into the mountains. And on this side, like cliffs coming right in, and it's maybe 300, 400, 500 feet of cliffs with tunnels on both sides. And we got to a little town called La Zizze, small, had a little key, little ships come in, and hotel and something. And the hotel manager says, he said, he seemed pleased to see us. He said, I've been saving for this day. He went down the cellar somewhere. He said, I'm saving. And he brought back Asti Spumante, which is a form of champagne. I remember we had a few bottles of that. And then the war, now we had the war of the tunnels. I went through the tunnels. Yeah, I had General Ruffner, who was the artillery commander, he had a captain aide. And I was behind the aide. And the tunnels were here, then there'd be a road with no tunnels, but the Germans were on the other side. If they see anything move, they shoot at that, and the shells start coming in. All three of us hit the dirt, and there's nothing here but just. And this young officer in front of me almost kicked me in the head. I mean, he went down so fast. We survived it. Anyway, we got through the tunnels. Some of them tunnels they were very serious. The shells would break open and men would be there and be killed. Somebody had the bright idea of getting one of these amphibious vehicles and going around the tunnels, loaded up with men, and the vehicle sank. The vehicle's still in the bottom of that lake. We've been talking about trying to get it out of there, but it's hundreds of feet. They're probably well preserved. It's very cold glacial water. And it's one of the sad things, and we got through that lake to the little town of Torbally, which is next door to Riva at the head of the lake. When General Duff got off when we landed at San Benedetto de Po, and that night we got to the Po River, I think he either stepped on a mine or in some way was injured, so we had to send him back. And so General Hayes immediately called headquarters command to send him Bill Darby, Colonel Bill Darby. And he said, and on the way, he put in his promotion to Brigadier General, which is kind of a nice story. So General Darby shows up, and now he becomes the leader of Task Force Duff, in essence. And after spending, I guess 3 or 4 or 5 days trying to go through the tunnels, we get to the town of Torbally, this little town with a hotel or something, because it's kind of a summer resort. And Duff, you probably heard this story, but Bill Darby, now General Darby, fought very valiantly. He was the command of Rangers and protecting the troops when they landed at Anzio. The Germans were in the mountains, and our guys were on the beach, and they had the Rangers trying to force the Germans back a little bit. And he'd seen a lot of war. He's standing there talking to Master Sergeant Evans, who I think he was the head sergeant in one of the regiments. I think it was the 86th, but I wouldn't swear to it. And a couple of other officers and men standing around. Probably the last shell fired in that theater came whizzing out of the mountains and landed right in the square, killed Darby, killed Evans, and 2 or 3 other men, knocked a friend of mine, Chuck Miller, into a building. He was standing in the doorway. I wasn't there, but I was not too far away. So it was a sad ending to a brilliant career. These things you remember.
Did you go up into the Yugoslav?
I'm sorry?
Did you go to the Yugoslavian?
Yeah, oh sure. Well, the whole division did. There was a possibility that there'd be trouble along the Isonzo River. The Isonzo River divides that eastern part of Italy from Yugoslavia. Slovenia, I think it is. And this has always been, for 100 years, been a fight over who should have this territory. And Caparetta, all right, now I've got to tell you about Caparetta. Caparetta is the name of an Italian city or small town. In World War I, the Germans, Austrians, and Italians fought to a standstill. I mean, they fought in these high mountains. You go and see an emplacement, a gun emplacement, a door hanging on hinges, and look on the other side of this valley is another one pointing that way. And that's how the war went. But when they want heavy casualties, with spies, they'd find out when the troops are going to be changed, like they're going to take the other guys down and bring the new guys in. If they can start an avalanche, that's where you kill people. And they did it, both sides. Want to know more about it, read Hemingway's Farewell to Arms. It's all about a volunteer ambulance driver who served on the Italian army with casualties. It's very well done, very true to life. And so Germans, I think, finally, the Germans and the Austrians, a little bit, I mean, the Italians, Austrians, a little bit, I love them. Love is much more fun than war. I mean, we had a fight, but, let's not be too, Austrians a little bit that way. Germans aren't. Let's get the job done now. You're efficient. So they had a young major in the German Army, mountain troops, and they have great mountain troops. They had like 3 mountain divisions. We had 1. They had 3 or 4 more. The French had mountain troops. We were late to the game. We learned fast, though. And he stiffened up. He ordered an attack, and they did attack, broke through the Italians finally into a town of Caparetta, Italians retreated down into the Po Valley to a river called Piave, where they stiffened up. That's like 50 miles away. And then the Germans sort of ran out of supplies. So at that time, the war about ended. And the name of that particular young mountain troop major became famous in World War II. His name was Erwin Rommel, head of the Africa Corps, who survived, because he was part of the plot to unseat Hitler, and was a very bad tale. I mean, the Gestapo said, look, how are we going to kill you? We're going to kill you because you're a traitor. But we want to do it, because you're Germans all think you're the best thing since white bread, we'll take care of family. If you resist, and we'll give you poison, or if you don't, well, we're going to hang you up on one of these meat hooks, and the hell with your family. So of course he took the poison, because in the minds of the Germans, he was one of the great leaders of their time. They didn't realize this. They do now, of course. That's all part of it, you know. We didn't fight along with the Yugoslavs finally, but our presence was there, and that's where we were when the war ended. No, the war ended before that. The war ended when we were in Lago de Garda. So then we stayed there. Then we pulled out to go home. I was given a pass. I was given a driver, myself, and an interpreter, and rations and sleeping bags in a jeep to go see the battlefield. So I went into Austria, across the Glockner Range. There's a high mountain there. I got as far. I spent 1 hour in the Germans in Hitler's hideout, Berchtesgaden. And I spent about half an hour in Salzburg, which is 10 miles away. And an MP comes and says, "Are you from the 10th Mountain Division?" "Yes, we are." You could see it on a jeep. "Well, your order is to turn around and go back immediately. You're going home." I said, "Oh, rats." So we turned around and joined the division. We came back to Florence, got on a boat, got off. And the interesting thing is we're the last division to go to Europe and the first division to go home. Why? That's not the way it works. The first in is the last out, because they had us all ready to go retrain a little bit, go to the Pacific coast, and attack Japan, the northern part of Japan, which is quite mountainous. That was our mission, and that was scheduled, I heard later, maybe in December. This is what, August or something like that. That's how we got home.
So did you go back
well,
after you returned to the United States? Did you go back?
Well, the war ended. A boat just got into the harbor when the war ended. They dropped the atomic bomb. Nobody went to Japan. That was over for us. They let us out. I had about a month of terminal leave, which was so we got in October. So I got out officially and off the payroll, and then I joined the reserves. And this is interesting. When we were going out, we took us all to Swift, this camp over here in Colorado Springs, Camp Carson, which supplied the Camp Hale with the supplies, and was an officer captain behind me who I didn't know, but I knew who he was. His name was Hal Burton, and he was a newspaper man and so forth. And we were both captains, and it was two lines. You get here and line here. This line is you want to get out and go tomorrow. This line is you want to go in the reserves. Well, I said, Hal, what are you going to do? And he said, John, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to stay in the reserves. Let's see what happens. I said, okay. So the two of us signed up for the reserves. That's where when I finally became a lieutenant colonel years later, and served with an active division for a lot of years, a combat reserve division with men, went to camp. Then I got through that, and the division went, the 77th Division, very famous of World War I and II, and I became the Inspector General of that division, which is I'm a medical guy, right? But I'm also a good soldier. I mean, I must say, I knew a lot about a lot of things. And so I became the IG, made inspections and complaints, and took care of that. That's on the general's personal staff. I mean, I can see him without making a week's advance notice. I can knock on his door and tell his aide that I'm here. He says, let him in, And then they closed the division down in 45 or 6, and I found a unit I still had time to serve before I had to retire. And it was a very interesting, it was a civil affairs group. There were 3 of them in the country. And it's too bad we didn't do more of civil affairs in Iraq, in my view, because there's the hot war going on. But after we were planning to go to a certain island in Caribbean, which we didn't go to, but we were planning for it. I mean, we had everybody, and they had police and guys. And so I became the Inspector General of that, and I was Lieutenant Colonel. And when I retired, that was my last assignment. I retired in 51, I think it was.
Well, in summing up your experiences in the 10th Mountain Division,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
In summing up your experiences in the 10th
Yeah.
Mountain Division,
Sure.
what would you say it means to you to have been in the 10th Mountain Division?
Well, I think it's the experience of a lifetime. I don't think there's any question about it. And I think I'm speaking for most of the guys here. I mean, these are select people. These are volunteers. I mean, I said we were the Marines of the Army. These were people, and because of many of them were college graduates. And I had 2 years of college. Many of them, and I was still going, and I was working, you know. But many of these people, they were called the college boys by the troops over there. They'd start fights with us in the theater, like in Florence. Yeah, we were unique, no question. The intelligence level was probably superior to any other division in the Army. We had most of the men from the snow areas. We didn't. Oh, that's not true. Except when we got into Fort, I told you about Camp Swift from the mountains. They decided to increase our size from 10,000 to 15,000. So everybody came in from Mississippi and Arizona and Texas, you name it. None of it to do with mountains. Most of it nothing to do with high altitude or cold weather. Doesn't matter. We had good leadership. Our corporals and our sergeants and our lieutenants were the top men. We couldn't make everybody an officer, but in the 10th Mountain, when we were up in Hale, I would, without hesitation, say that half of those people were qualified to become officers. Maybe it's 40%. I don't know the exact number, but they had a very high degree. But they would not be allowed to come back to the 10th, so they stayed sergeants. And the coach of them, many of them were foreign-born, Germans, and a lot of Austrians, Swedes. Oh, they were Norwegians, skiers, mountain climbers. I mean, no, they had and these were very dynamic, strong, smart people, but they were where they wanted to be in the war. And that's why our division. I mean, I know I'm bragging, but I think I'm true what I say, that I would put them against any, including the Marine Corps. I mean, I don't stand back for anybody. We had what it took, and I don't think there's any man in this of the 400 or whatever, here's 50 or so, would challenge me on that statement. We were mostly volunteers, the young groups, but then the groups later followed suit. They were just as good. They fought along with us. They were all in one division. And so I was so happy when the 10th Mountain Division started again back about 20 years ago in Fort Drum, of all places. Now, I spent a lot of time in the reserves in Fort Drum. We used to go every summer. I know every blade of grass and every tree. And the highest mountain in Fort Drum is probably a 10-foot anthill, you know. I mean, it's a joke. And we've had some very arguments. I got a name, I won't name them. I got some bitter people who were in the 10th that said, forget the 10th. They're not mountain troops. Forget it. But the armies. But I think the Army did the right thing. You want a unit that has a good history to challenge the men to live up to it. And that's where we come in. We have black troops now in, and there are women in there. We had none of that. They had a black general of the Army just stepped down. It was the 10th Mountain Division. Fine. A good man is a good man. And I guess a good woman is a good woman, too.
Well, before we close, is there any memory that you have that...
Any more what?
Is there any memory that you have that comes to mind that you maybe have never shared with anyone else that you would like to share?
That's been censored, dear. Of course I have. What red-blooded man doesn't have a memory he was not going to share with anybody?
For posterity, is there
that goes for women too, I guess.
You'd like to close on or close with?
Okay. I think I've summarized everything pretty well. It's been the basis of my life. I have been a member of this organization since it started. In fact, I was one of the starting members. In 1945, we were released, and of course, I went back to college to get my degree. I was into business. I had married, I had a daughter. I had to have a place to live. I hadn't built any houses for 4 or 5 years. I needed a car. I found a guy that sold me a car that was 5 or 6 or 10 years old. It had 70,000 miles, and I was glad to get it. I gave him $700 for this thing, but it did what I needed, and the cars weren't made for a couple years. So we had to redo everything. Hofstra, the university I attended, because I lived in Long Island, and I transferred my NYU thing to Hofstra. I wound up, and eventually I was the president of the Alumni Association. We have a big Pride Club, which is a big athletic support group. I've been very active in that. I've been on the board of that and so forth. I was mayor of my village where I lived in Port Washington. Yeah, on and on and on. You know, certain things people are, and they can't help it. Some people sit around and read a lot and think a lot and do whatever, and some guys are a little bit like me, and as long as they're health. Now I'm 87 years old. You didn't ask me how old I'm. Thank you for not asking. I'm 87 in April. I have spinal stenosis, which cuts back on my operation, my legs. That's why I use this thing. But mind-wise, I'm still okay, and take a very active interest in.
It made you the man that you became.
Well, yeah, I was that man before I got in, but it gave me an opportunity to be expressive, to do things. The Army can be that way, or it can be smothered. You can't, you do everything. If you get a commander who has no imagination, follows the book. I've served both in the 77th, certainly the Army did not run the 10th Mountain Division. There weren't anybody who knew anything about mountains. We had thousands of mules, four-legged mules. We had some two-legged mules. We had four-legged mules. The Army doesn't. What colonel or general in the Army knows anything about mules? I mean, it's out of. So they were learning like us, and we had these high-powered people with great intelligence who were probably smarter than the damn generals. I say that freely. I'm not knocking the generals. I'm telling you how good the men were. I trust my life with a corporal. Some of these guys, I trust my life with them, being smart. And that's basically the whole thing of our division. We had the smart, and I don't think we'll ever have a division like that again. You can't afford to put all those people in one place. You've got to distribute those people out. You got a sergeant that's that smart, make him a lieutenant and put him somewhere else. But because of the peculiarity of why we're there, skiing in the mountains, we would say we'd pass up on a promotion to stay where we were. I know personally men who were offered a promotion. I had two men working in my section who both were promoted in the battlefield. Two great men, Rick Rocker, and he's one of those guys, I can't remember his second name. He's up in Fort Drum now. He's retired. But yeah, unusual is the word I would say. Unusual, never to again be repeated. And yeah.
Thank you for your interview.
What?
Thank you for your interview.
You're entirely welcome. Hope I didn't bore you. Are you getting good response?
Yeah, you were fantastic. I thought he was
What?
outstanding.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, well, I guess I didn't want to overdo it. I may have in the minds of some people, but I really can't find the higher praise, honestly, for what most of us were. Oh, yeah, we have a few sad sacks in life, but that's life. But mostly, and I know personally, people turn down a commission unless they would guarantee to come to the 10th Mountain back. Say, we can't do that. Well, no, forget it. And I'll stay a sergeant.
That's just amazing, isn't
I
it?
know. That's
That surprise you?
Well, you're going to be at the banquet tonight,
Yes, I am.
right?